This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Hi there, and welcome to episode 234 of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast. And today, again, is another short bite-sized episode. This time, I'm joined by Paul Phillips, who's very much into organisational change and works an awful lot in rugby union. The topic that we're going to be looking at is overthinking. You know, it's so easy in sport and in everyday life to get in our own way, and then to decide not to do something and let fear take over. So Paul is going to share with you a few different ideas on how you can combat overthinking and fear. He alludes to some research that he's done in a rugby setting to back up his solutions, and I also go on to share some advice too. I hope you enjoy it.
I think one of the common things within high performance rugby is the thoughts are normally generated first as opposed to the behaviours. So, of course, you know, sensation, feelings, the thoughts and behaviours are all paramount. They're all big contributors to high performance. But behaviour tends to be the last step. Thoughts tend to be, what I've seen, the thoughts tend to be the first step. So we want to try and turn that around. So if we can instill the behaviours first, then the rest tends to follow from there. So I always use the example of going for a run. If you're not usually a runner, and you're trying to motivate yourself to go for a run, you're thinking, and the problem with that is then you think yourself out of doing it. Whereas if you just got up and did it, chances are you're going to be going on your run and you realize that it's not as bad as you initially thought it would be. So that then obviously leads into the fear factor. So those are the common themes I've noticed in community and hype.
Okay, so yeah, just what you're talking about there, even just the runner. I've just been doing some work today with a player coming out of a serious injury, and fitness obviously is one of the key things that they're looking at. And we were having this exact same discussion about how I suppose they're often feeling like they haven't done enough, and they're sort of second guessing themselves, that they're thinking in the future really, and then they'll compare themselves in the past. And we were just thinking of like, well, how do you just think about the moment, and how do you just do things? And literally, I mean, I think we've all been there on whether it's a run or a training session where the first 5-10 minutes isn't much fun, but sometimes you just got to just jump in, haven't you, and just do it.
It's exactly it. And I think the strange thing is we all know the answers because we tend to have had that experience before. You know, we've done it, we tried it, and we realize, oh, this is not as bad as I initially thought. But then we go back to that kind of restart where we're thinking exactly the same thing. I think a great tool that I've used for myself personally in the past was, I think it was James Clear's 2-minute rule in Atomic Habits. And he said, just use that 2-minute rule as a gateway to start in, to kind of break that thought mode and get straight into the behavior mode. So stops you procrastinating, stops you building that overthinking and talking yourself out of it. Whereas if you give yourself that 2 minutes, that gateway element of it, it chucks you right in, and you soon enough, quite quickly realize, not just in terms of your thoughts, but also physically, oh, this wasn't as bad as what I was thinking. So it tended to work for me in the past,
Yeah, I think unconsciously I followed that rule with that particular person, because we got to the point where we were, right, what really good questions can I ask myself? And it was essentially, it was that, what can I do in the next 2 minutes? What can I do now to affect this?
Exactly,
It's certainly a lot better than, what should I avoid doing, and et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk a little bit more about fear, and you talked about tackling in your 52 model, bit of like research you did there. I'm guessing when it comes down to fear in a rugby player, when it comes to tackling, it'll be probably the size of the opponent will be certainly probably one of the big factors in strength. Yeah, definitely.
In terms of the psychology element, high performance, I've also come across players who, similar to where you talked about coming back from an injury, where they've really struggled to build up that motivation to get into a tackle again, because that was what initially caused the injury in the first place. So as you so rightly say, when they see then, a bigger player, a number 8 who is 18, 19, 20 stone, who's quite a quick, powerful, direct runner with the ball. Those feelings of the fear of that injury happening, or the fear of general hurt is very prevalent. Is very high. So with this player in particular, we used visualization cues with this individual. So we tried to do a moment by moment of what that picture would realistically look like if, following his movement patterns from analysis, what it would look like coming towards him. So how would he get in his preparation phase, his contact phase, and his follow through? And it seemed to really help the player. So we not just applied it obviously in a visual preparation sense, but we applied it into a field with a pattern movement player that we had in our team at the time. The beauty of that was we control the variables in our environment, right? So we can control the pace the player was coming at, and we could build up the pace. We could build, the power that our player was involved with, and also then measure those preparation phase, contact phase, and follow through phase variables in preparation for an effective tackle. And we did. We spent, I think it was about an 8-minute skill session on it, which built up into a real life when we did a team run. And we had deliberate practice then where we had this acting number 8 to play in a system that the opposition was playing for, to try to run directly at him. And the first 2 tackles were, you could still see there was that bit of cautiousness. His back was kind of curled up a little, which could cause a bit of injury. So we just pulled him to one side and went over those 3 trigger cues that we gave him at the time, which kind of helped him in the practice in the drill session. And once he used kind of self-talk with those 3 cues, once he got back in the field, he was making some really effective tackles. So we thought, right, okay, so he's in a good preparation and in a good mindset for the game then on Saturday. And there was 3 occasions where they met, same player, and there was 3 occasions where he made really effective plus line tackles where he actually pushed the player back. So this player was an outside centre, number 13, against a number 8 who was 19, 20 stone. So that visual cue, that visual process that we managed to do with him was probably the pivot of that success. It really helped him. It may not help another player, of course, but it helped what he needed. And knowing the player was key to that. Knowing what he needed was absolutely essential about our relationship. So those 3 visual cues that we had was critical.
When you mentioned there what that worked for him, but it may not work for another person, I think that is critical, isn't it? Because some people are very visual. They've got very visual learning styles, and in that type of situation, they'll lap that up. Others might well be more kinesthetic or auditory, and they don't learn in that way. So it's got to be adapted, that approach.
Exactly.
And I know, just thinking aloud here, something I do as well if I'm working with an athlete and we're talking about maybe bravery in a tackle, I'll often get them to think what their brave face looks like. I call it like my brave face exercise, and we'll get them potentially, we look at a player that they respect and admire. They might look at an animal. Lion's the usual one when you think of bravery. And if it's a kid, sometimes like a superhero. Yeah. And then we bring that into the visualization there, where they're, as well as seeing themselves powerfully executing the tackle, they're seeing the lion or the superhero or whoever it is. And it is massively powerful.
Yeah, I've used exactly the same technique with kids. So we've used metaphors alongside that, where, for example, if it's a specific superhero cartoon or a film that they admire, and we say, well, what do they look like in this situation? And what would they do in this situation? And we try to utilize that example in a metaphoric way that they can relate to, because, it also interrelates with, how you communicate as well. If we're very concise in using a metaphor, we can use 1, 2, 3 words. Or if we said, just remember, like we did in training, perform like a lion. They will know in detail what that looked like. That word association, that metaphor, they know what that would look like in that position. And that's worked, it's worked wonders in metaphor. And like you said, that association is a fantastic tool to use.
Well, I hope you found that useful and that there were some nice, timely reminders for you. On overthinking, at different times in our life, maybe when there's more pressure on, when we're more stressed, or if we've got important moments in a sporting context or in a performance context as a whole, overthinking no doubt does take place when we're highly activated in that way. So, one of the things that we can do to be able to help ourselves is to hone a pre-performance routine, or in some sports, a pre-shot routine. This is so vital. And obviously in this episode, with Paul, we've touched on a few elements that you could use in a pre-shot routine or a pre-performance routine. We've got the visualization aspect, and also we've got the rehearsal of some cue words there too. And this takes me back to episode 221 as well, where I discuss with Jeremy Snape about playing cricket under pressure, under severe pressure. So if you want to educate yourself on pre-performance routines, this episode is useful, as is episode 221. A key message though I want to really get out there when it comes down to pre-shot or pre-performance routines is that you can't just expect to try something once, especially in a competitive situation, and for it to work. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be prepared to do some proactive process training. And that might be 5 minutes a day. It might be 5 minutes every other day, where you certainly try to hone in on one or two key things that you would like to integrate into your routines, and then practice them, train them, get used to them, get comfortable with them. And then when it comes down to these high pressure situations, when there are big stakes, you're going to be much better equipped. You're going to be relatively comfortable with your routine, the timing of your routine, the relevant things that you might say to yourself or visualize. They're going to be well oiled and well tuned. So, for more tricks and tips like this to help give you an advantage on your opponents or over the competition, please do sign up to the Mental Edge. It's a regular newsletter that I send out every 2 to 3 weeks. It has lots and lots of resources to be able to help you. Have a fantastic day.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.